Welcome to Let's, English stories you can enjoy anytime, anywhere. Today's story takes you to Paris, more than 100 years ago. At that time, the city was full of artists, engineers, and dreamers. It was the age of steam trains, telegrams, and new inventions. And in the middle of it all, one man had an idea that shocked everyone. He wanted to build a tower. A very tall tower, taller than any building in the world. Some people thought it was a joke. Others were angry. They said it would destroy the beauty of Paris. But the man who had the idea, Gustave Eiffel, believed in it. He believed in metal and science and modern design. He believed that the future needed bold shapes and brave thinking. So, while the world laughed, he kept working. This is the story of the Eiffel Tower, not just a building, but a symbol. It began as a strange idea, and it became one of the most famous structures in the world. So sit back, take a walk, or close your eyes, and let's travel to Paris in the year 1886. Paris was changing. In the late 1800s, the city was alive with energy. There were carriages on the streets, lights in the cafes, and music in the parks. Every day, someone invented something new. Elevators, bicycles, photography. The future was coming fast, and Paris wanted to be at the center of it. In 1886, the French government made an announcement. They were planning a World's Fair, a great international exhibition. It would take place in Paris in 1889. The goal was to celebrate 100 years since the French Revolution. People would come from all over the world to see new art, machines, and ideas. But Paris needed something big, something no one had ever seen before. They announced a competition. Architects and engineers could send in their designs for a new monument. It had to be bold, modern, and tall, at least 300 meters. Gustave Eiffel was already a well-known engineer. His company had built bridges, stations, and steel buildings across Europe. Eiffel believed in metal. He believed that iron was the future. When he heard about the competition, he remembered a sketch his team had made of a tall, open-frame tower. He decided to enter. The design was strange. It didn't look like a palace or a church or a statue. It looked like a giant triangle of steel standing on 4 legs. It was not beautiful in the traditional sense. It was raw, new, industrial. Some people were excited, others were shocked. The newspapers wrote about it. Artists called it a monster. One famous writer said it looked like a metal skeleton. A group of Parisian intellectuals wrote a letter demanding that the project be stopped. They said it would ruin the skyline and destroy the romance of Paris. But Eiffel believed in his idea. He said the tower would be not only the tallest in the world, but the most elegant. He promised it would be strong, safe, and full of light. He also said it could be removed later, after 20 years, if people really hated it. In 1887, the city gave him permission to begin. Eiffel's company began preparing the ground at the edge of the Seine River in a park called the Champ de Mars. The location was perfect, near the center of Paris, open to the sky. First, they dug the foundations. They had to go deep because the tower would be heavy. Then they started building upward, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. Each part was carefully designed and measured. There were no computers. Everything had to be calculated by hand. More than 300 workers helped with the construction. Some worked on the ground. Others climbed high into the air, walking on narrow beams of steel. It was dangerous, but Eiffel created safety rules that were new at the time. He made sure workers had safety belts and guardrails. As the tower grew, so did the attention. People came every day to watch. Some laughed, some clapped, some shook their heads. "It looks like a giant chimney," said one man. "It's growing like a weed," said another. But Eiffel didn't stop. He climbed the tower often himself, checking the progress. He trusted the numbers, he trusted his team, and deep down, he believed that one day, people would change their minds. The tower rose higher and higher, cutting into the sky like a needle. At 100 meters, it was already taller than anything in Paris. Then 150, then 200, then 250. By early 1889, the top was in sight, and Paris, whether it liked it or not, was about to have a new symbol. To many people, the Eiffel Tower looked like magic, but it was not magic. It was work, careful, difficult, sometimes dangerous work. It all began in 1887, 2 years before the fair. At that time, the site near the Seine River was just an open park, with grass and trees. Gustave Eiffel and his team chose this location because it was flat, central, and large enough for the wide base of the tower. First, they dug into the ground. The foundations had to be strong, stronger than anything they had built before. Each leg of the tower would carry massive weight. On the side near the river, they used special underwater supports. It was slow and careful work. Once the base was ready, the metal parts began to arrive. Each piece of iron was made in a factory near Paris. Workers shaped the pieces using heat and pressure. Then they sent them to the tower site by train and cart. There were more than 18,000 pieces in total, and over 2.5 million rivets, small metal pins that held everything together. Nothing was left to chance. Every hole, every angle, every beam was measured exactly. Eiffel's engineers used drawings, hundreds of pages, to plan every part. At that time, this level of precision was rare. But Eiffel insisted on it. The tower was built like a giant puzzle. Workers began by placing the 4 legs. At first, they pointed outwards, and they had to be slowly pulled together. Special wooden supports held them in place. Workers checked the angles every day using ropes, levels, and large measuring tools. The biggest challenge came at 57 meters high, where the 4 legs met. A huge iron platform had to be placed between them. It had to be perfectly level. If it leaned even a little, the whole tower would fail. It took weeks to prepare. Then, one cold morning in March, the workers began lifting the platform into the air. They used hydraulic jacks, powerful machines that pushed the heavy metal upward. The wind was strong, and the iron creaked. People watched from the streets, holding their breath. Finally, the platform locked into place. It was level, it was safe, and the tower could rise higher. Eiffel was not just an engineer, he was also a leader. He visited the site every day, even in bad weather. He talked to the workers, encouraged them, and checked their progress. He believed that every bolt mattered. Every worker mattered too. Safety was a top priority. At that time, construction work was dangerous, but Eiffel introduced new safety rules. He required guardrails on high platforms. He gave workers harnesses and encouraged brakes. He even set up a small medical station on site. As a result, There were very few serious accidents, something almost unheard of for a project of this size. People in Paris were watching. Some visited the site every week, taking notes or sketching the progress. Others came just to stare. They said, "It will fall." They said, "It can't go higher." They said, "It's just too strange." But it kept growing. At 100 meters, the tower was taller than any building in Paris. At 150, it could be seen from the edge of the city. At 200, it became impossible to ignore. The iron shimmered in the sunlight. It seemed to move as clouds passed behind it. Some people began to change their minds. Others didn't say anything, but they came back to look again. Then came the final stage. The third platform, the highest, was small and narrow. The wind was stronger at that height, and the space to work was limited. Still, the team continued. They built a staircase that twisted upward, then began placing the final iron beams and the tip of the tower, the spire. In total, the construction took just 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days. Fast, even by today's standards. On March 31st, 1889, Gustave Eiffel invited journalists and officials for a special moment. He would raise the French flag at the top of the tower himself. The elevators were not yet working, so Eiffel and his guests climbed the stairs, all the way to the third platform. They stopped to rest, drank water, and admired the view. Then they continued up a narrow metal ladder to the top. The sky was cold and blue. At exactly noon, Eiffel stood on the tiny platform. He held the flag in his hand. The wind pulled it open. Cameras clicked. The city below was quiet. And then the flag flew. By the spring of 1889, the tower was almost complete. The top platform was in place. A small team worked to finish the spire, a narrow metal point that reached even higher into the sky. From the ground, it looked like the tower was touching the clouds. People stopped in the streets to look up. Some were amazed. Others were still angry. Even now, many Parisians didn't like it. Writers called it a terrible factory chimney. One newspaper said it looked like it had fallen from another planet. But Eiffel stayed calm. He had heard it all before. What people didn't know was that he had more than beauty in mind. Eiffel believed his tower could be useful. It wasn't just art. It was also science. He had designed it to resist strong winds. The open iron frame let the air pass through. The shape made it stronger, not weaker. He also believed it could be used for experiments, to study wind, pressure, light, and later, radio waves. In March 1889, Eiffel finally climbed to the top. There was no elevator yet, so he took the stairs, all 1,710 of them. He was 56 years old. At the top, he looked out at the city. The streets were tiny, the river was shining, and the hills beyond Paris were soft and green. The wind was strong, but the tower didn't shake. It stood still, like a mountain of metal. Eiffel said quietly, "This is only the beginning." On May 6, 1889, the World's Fair opened. It was called the Exposition Universelle, the Universal Exhibition. More than 30 million people would visit over the next few months. They came from every continent to see machines, art, music, clothes, and inventions. But the one thing everyone wanted to see was the tower. And not just see it, climb it. During the fair, more than 12,000 people climbed the Eiffel Tower every day. Some by stairs, some by the new elevators, which moved slowly and made strange sounds. At 300 meters high, people felt nervous, but they also felt amazed. It was the tallest man-made structure in the world. Nothing else came close. From the top, visitors could see the whole of Paris and beyond. People described the feeling as flying. Some cried, some laughed. One man even proposed marriage right there, in the wind, under the sky. Still, critics kept talking. One wrote, "It is not art. It is a machine. It has no soul." Another said, "It is the death of beauty." But ordinary people didn't seem to care. They took home postcards, souvenirs, little metal tower models. They told their friends. They brought their children. Even Queen Victoria of Britain sent her ambassador to visit it. The Americans were impressed. Russian engineers studied the design. Gustave Eiffel had done something that was impossible to ignore. But there was a small problem. The tower was not built to stay forever. From the beginning, the city gave Eiffel a contract for only 20 years. After that, they could tear it down. It was supposed to be temporary, just for the fair. Eiffel knew this, but he had a plan. He would prove the tower was useful, not just beautiful or strange, but practical. He let scientists come and test things. He let the army use the top platform to send messages. Later, he supported experiments with early radio, using the tower to send signals over long distances. The Eiffel Tower began to show its real strength. And slowly, public opinion started to change. Painters began to paint it. Poets started to write about it. People walked under it with pride instead of shame. One child said, "It looks like it's holding up the sky." And perhaps it was. The Eiffel Tower was built to disappear. From the beginning, the contract said the tower could stand for 20 years. After that, the city of Paris had the right to take it down. It was part of the plan. Many thought the tower was just a temporary showpiece, a machine made for the 1889 World's Fair, nothing more. But Gustave Eiffel had a different vision. He believed the tower had more to give. So while the crowds admired the views and bought souvenirs, Eiffel began something new. A quiet campaign to save the tower. First, he opened the tower to science. He let meteorologists measure wind and weather at different heights. He invited engineers to study air pressure. He welcomed physicists, artists, even writers to use the space. The tower was not just tall, it was useful, and Eiffel wanted the city to understand that. Then came something unexpected. Radio. In the early 1890s, radio waves were a new and exciting discovery. Scientists realized they could send messages through the air, invisible signals that didn't need wires. But they needed height. They needed space. Eiffel saw the future. He offered the tower as a place for radio experiments. Antennas were placed at the top. Messages were sent from the tower to nearby towns, then farther, then across France. In 1903, the French military used the tower to send a secure message over 400 kilometers away. It worked, and it changed everything. Suddenly, the metal monster became a national tool, a communications tower, a point of defense, a gift to science. The same people who once laughed at it now depended on it. So when the year 1909 came, the year the contract ended, something happened. They didn't take it down. The city decided to let it stay. Quietly, without ceremony, the Eiffel Tower moved from temporary to permanent. Eiffel had succeeded. His strange creation had earned its place in Paris. But the story didn't stop there. In World War I, the tower played a critical role. French forces used it to send messages to the front. In one case, a signal from the tower helped stop a surprise German advance. Paris was saved, and the tower had helped. In the years that followed, Eiffel became something of a legend. He continued to support science, helping with aerodynamics and weather research. But his name was already written in iron, 300 meters above the ground. The tower continued to grow, not in size, but in meaning. It appeared on postcards and paintings. It became a meeting point, a landmark, a quiet witness to history. It saw celebrations, protests, sunrises, and wars. Paris changed, but the tower stayed. People proposed marriage at the top. Children looked up and dreamed. Artists tried to capture its shape. Photographers waited for the perfect light. And for tourists, the tower became a must-see. Some cried when they reached the top. Others smiled in silence. No one forgot it. Eiffel, in his later years, often returned to walk beneath it. He didn't give speeches. He didn't need to. The tower spoke for him. Today, the Eiffel Tower is one of the most recognized structures on Earth. You can see it on posters, postcards, T-shirts, and coffee cups. People visit it from every country. It appears in movies, paintings, and dreams. For many, it is Paris. But how did it become that? In the early 1900s, the tower was still new. People were still deciding how they felt about it. But artists saw something special. Writers compared it to a lighthouse standing above the city. Painters loved the way it changed color in the light, gray in the morning, gold at sunset, black against the stars. In 1925, an American businessman offered to buy the tower. He said he would take it apart and move it to New York. Paris laughed and said, no. In World War II, when the Nazis occupied Paris, the tower became a quiet symbol of resistance. The French cut the elevator cables, so Hitler would have to climb the stairs if he wanted to reach the top. He never tried. Later, when peace returned, the Eiffel Tower stood tall, untouched, still watching over the city. Over the years, it changed in small ways. It got new elevators, new lights, a radio mast. Restaurants were added. Tourists could now dine in the sky, watching the city lights sparkle below. In 1985, for the first time, the tower lit up at night with golden lights. Then, in 2000, for the new millennium, it was covered in sparkling white lights that flashed every hour. People cheered. Couples kissed. It felt like magic. But the tower's magic wasn't just in its height. It was in its feeling. The Eiffel Tower meant different things to different people. To some, it was a place of memory, where they had gone as children or fallen in love. To others, it was a symbol of hope, something that had survived war, fear, and time. To travelers, it was a goal, the moment you finally saw Paris. And to engineers and dreamers, it was proof. Great ideas can become real. Today, more than 7 million people visit the tower each year. They stand in line, take photos, ride the elevators, and look out over the rooftops. From above, the city seems calm. The river moves like a silver ribbon. The cars are quiet. The past and present feel close together. Children laugh. Parents point. Strangers smile at each other in the wind. And far below, in the base of the tower, there is a small bronze plaque. It says, "To Gustave Eiffel, engineer, visionary, builder of dreams." Thank you for listening. What did you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you have an idea for a story you'd like to hear next, let me know.